recipes and your gardening needs while sipping on Kentucky bourbon. You sit right back in your big red hat. We're taking rural back from the urban. Listen to the stories where Kentucky proud. Share the giggles with all of your friends. You all tuned in to Friends Drifting.
Hi, I'm Joyce. Welcome to Friends Drift In, your connection to the farm-to-table movement throughout Eastern Kentucky. What do I mean by farm-to-table movement? Well, I mean it's time to get back to the soil. It's time to learn where your food is coming from. Here in Appalachia, it's time to start seeds. And I'm here with my nephew, Jake. And we're going to be starting some seeds from scratch. And one of the most important things for people that are working in the kitchen or trying to get to the farm-to-table movement is to involve children. The reason that I started Farm to Table and the Friends Drift In is because 7 years ago, when I went back to farming, I couldn't find the seeds that I had grown up with. Friends Drift In was my grandparents' restaurant. And when they had their produce stand in front of the restaurant, one of the things they sold was green cushaws. Green striped cushaws are a winter squash. They take about 110 days to grow. And they are very indigenous to Appalachia. They are part of our culture. They are part of our food. And when I couldn't find those seeds, looking in the normal, like a Gurney's or Burpee's type catalog, then I started wondering, well, what has happened? What has happened? And I started scurrying around and starting to collect seeds. The most important thing to me is that we preserve Appalachia and our heritage and our vegetables. I met Friends Drift In as an article in the Appalachian News Express and as a website, friendsdriftin.com, because I want to preserve Appalachia for my nephew and the next generation. So what we've done today is we've started with some organic mix, and then we're going to put them in an egg crate. These egg crates are pretty cool because they're made from corn. Jake, can you start filling that up? Fill it up. So they are a corn-based product. It's very easy for your children to work with. You just kind of stamp it down in here. And then we add some seeds. Now, Jake, what's the most important thing in the garden for you? What is your favorite thing in the garden?
Cucumbers.
Cucumbers! Now, Jake, what happens when you steal all my cucumbers? Jake likes to get out in the garden and take his Boy Scout knife, and he goes and he peels cucumbers and eats them all. And so when it's time for me to photograph for Friends Drift In, I have no cucumbers because Jake has ate them all. So today, I hope that you go out and you buy some seeds. You get in the kitchen with your kids and you find seeds that are native to Appalachia. The seeds that you remember growing up with. Look for those old-time varieties. And after we've planted these seeds, we just seal this egg crate right up. And you can set these in a window and they will start to sprout in about a week to 10 days. And one of the most amazing things is that seeds are very, very tiny. These are Swiss chard seeds, and that's what we're going to be talking about today in the kitchen. But they're like a beet. They're like a beet seed. And each seed contains 17 or 18 little seeds within this pod. And it's an amazing thing that what we're going to cook in the kitchen can grow and be so big, and it comes from such a tiny seed. So that's the way we're going to start Friends Drift In today in our first episode. Today at Friends Drift In, our first menu item is going to be orange ginger chicken. The most important thing when you're cooking is to think about ingredients. Today with Friends Drift In, we're going to use usual ingredients, most ingredients that you're familiar with, but we're going to try them in a little bit different ways. When we talk about ginger, ginger comes from China, and this is what you're looking for in the grocery store. Don't be afraid of it. It's easy to peel. You just mince it up a little bit. It's something not very expensive, and it's going to give you a whole lot of peppery power. So today we're going to do with the ginger chicken. The first thing you do is you use chicken fillets. These particular ones are cut thin. You could buy them thick and pound them out, but today I've used just a thin one because they go very easy to cook. They'll cook quickly when they're thin. And what you do is you roll it in a little bit of flour, and today I'm using some bourbon barrel pepper. It's smoked with just a little bit of old bourbon barrels. And what that does is that would give it a little bit of kick, and I'm adding a little bit of pepper and just a little bit of kosher salt. And we'll roll that around a couple of times. And then we're going to put it in a hot skillet. Now I've got the skillet started, but what we'll do is we will add oil. Oh, about enough to get a quarter of an inch on the bottom. And then I'm going to melt a little butter. Butter will help keep it brown. It will brown it, and it will brown the chicken and make it very beautiful when we present it on the plate. We take the chicken and we add it in. Now when we do this, we're going to cook it for 3 minutes per side. So it's going to sizzle for a little bit. So while I'm letting this sizzle, I'm going to work on the next ingredient. And the second menu item today, we'll be doing chard. Chard is what we started out with when I was talking with Jake, and we were planning when I showed you the seeds. Chard is a part of the beet family. If you're not familiar with chard, you'll be seeing it a lot at the Pike County Farmers Market in a couple months. It's just a regular green. Don't let the name surprise you. Chard comes in a variety of different colors. This particular one is called rhubarb chard because, like traditional rhubarb, it's very red and ribbed. Now what you do with chard is just like what you would do with any green. You just kind of roll it up. And then what the chefs would call you chiffonade. All that means is cutting it in a ribbon. Don't let the chefs fool you and make you think they're doing something really fancy. Chiffonade, it just means putting greens into a ribbon. What I've got is about 3/4 cup of chard, and we're going to add this to the skillet with just a little bit of oil. And we want that on about medium heat. And with the gas stove, that's not always easy to get medium heat, but that's what the knobs are for. You can twist them. So you just take the chard, and all we're going to do is we're wanting to wilt it. Well, you just kind of sprinkle it in there, and it will wilt down, just like you would like collard greens or anything else that you were doing on the stove. Now as we let that wilt, we're going to move on to the next, which is honey corn cakes, which are a fried corn cake. And what we're doing with that is something very simple. Everybody knows cornbread. And this is basically the same recipe you grew up with your grandmas doing. I'm just doing it a little bit different for a fun accent. Cornbread is usually a little bit more heavy on the cornmeal, but this time we're using equal parts cornmeal and flour. This is an all-purpose flour, 1 cup. I'm using 1 cup of yellow cornmeal, so it'll have a little bit of extra flavor. I'm adding 3/4 cup of frozen corn. I wish I had fresh, but it's still March. I'm going to stir that up a little bit. Then I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of local honey. This came from Ray Smith up at Kemper. And I'm going to add, the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of buttermilk. I'm going to add about 1.5 right now, and I've got 2 going. And while we're doing that, I'm going to flip this chicken. It's starting to get very brown. And you can hear the sizzle, and when it's sizzling, that means it's getting good. Now we've added this. Now the most important thing when you are making any kind of what they call a quick bread. What a quick bread means is it doesn't have yeast. Anytime that you're doing a quick bread, the coolest thing about these things is that they have to rise a little bit. So I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And then I'm adding an egg. Now, if you were a fancy chef, it would have stirred this all up and made a well, but it's no big deal, really. Making cornbread is no big deal. You just kind of stir it all in there, get it well blended. And if you're old enough to remember PBS and Nathalie Dupree always says when you're making corn cakes or you're making pancakes, walk away. Just walk away. I'm going to add a little bit more because this is a little bit thick. What you want is a consistency about the consistency of pancakes. Now we're going to let this walk away a minute, and what you'll see is it'll start bubbling. And that's the baking soda that'll give it a rise and make it so it's light and fluffy. So we're going to go back here, we're going to check on our chard, check on our chicken. And I've got about 1/2 inch of oil in my grandmother's skillet. Now, everybody knows that if you're in Appalachia and you don't have a collection of iron skillets, well, you need to get some. So what we're doing is we're going to heat this oil. Now, when we heat, my grandma said that when you heat it on the stove, the way to know if the oil was really hot enough, just wait for it, see if it starts to smoke a little bit, and then you take a little bit of water, and if it's not popping, then it's not ready. So we kind of crank that up a little bit more and get this going. And it's going to take a little bit. So while we're doing that, we'll work on flipping this. We will work on flipping this, stirring our chard a little bit. And we're going to pull this chicken out and set it aside. And while it's setting aside, we're going to work on what makes this chicken really romance. And that's adding a little bit, 2 cups of orange juice. Hear that sizzle. And we want that because we want the sugar to start reducing and getting thick. So we're adding a little bit of orange juice. We're going to add some sorghum. And I'm going to do this with my fingers because it's my house, my rules. When you're working with sorghum or you're working with local honey, one of the cool things to do is if you're measuring ahead of time, if you will grease your bowl, then it will come out a little bit easier. So I've added a little bit of honey, or a little bit of sorghum, a little bit of brown sugar, and I should have added a little bit of ginger, and we're going to do that right now. It'll be all right. So ginger will really make this pop. Ginger is very peppery, and it gives it a lemony taste. And you can hear, can you hear it sizzling? Do you hear it popping? That's when we know we're ready to go. Now it's going to smoke, so if the fire alarm goes off, I'm not allowed to turn the fans on because it makes too much noise, so y'all don't get too excited. Now to make a corn cake, what is really cool about these is I'm using a 1/4 cup to measure them, and I'm just going to flop them in here. Now these won't be perfect. These will not be perfectly round because you got a little bit of that corn in there, and that makes them irregular. But when they're irregular, that just makes them let you know that they are made with love. So we put those corn cakes on the hot, and we'll watch around the edges. And as this begins to heat up, we watch, and what we're looking for is the edges need to get brown. And as you watch, it's just like a pancake. You watch, and we've got bubbles around here. And as this bubbles, they start to, as it starts to get to the correct consistency, they'll start popping. And that's just exactly the same thing that happens with pancakes. They start popping. So once the bubbles start to pop, we can flip those over. And they should be golden brown. Now, Grandma always said kind of peek. But I'm working at an odd angle, and I can't peek like I should. But they're looking pretty good. Oh, yeah, they're looking really good. So we're going to flip these over. And if you were cooking for your own family, what you would do, if you were making the whole batch of these will make about 14. Is you would start your oven at 200. You would start plating them and then just stick them in the oven and hold them until you were finished with the rest of your meal. Now we're working with this orange reduction. And it's started to get thick, but it's not quite where I want it. So I'm gonna crank it up a little bit. And then I'm going to turn the chard totally down because it's about ready. It's browned up, it's good, it's wilted. We're going to add just a little bit of snap to that. So what I'm doing today is I've got some almonds. And I'm just going to put them on this last back burner. And we're going to throw some almonds in here just to toast them off. And I've already toasted these once. I used a teriyaki sauce just to get them a little warm. Hello. Well, apparently the back burner is not going to work. But that's all right. These are about done. So I'm just going to slide these back here. We're going to put these almonds to the front. I'm going to add just a little bit of teriyaki sauce. Let that sizzle up. That will give it a toasty, nutty flavor to the chard and really make it enjoyable. Now, as we've done this is about, it should get thicker. It's going to take about 4 or 5 more minutes for this to get to where I need it to go. In the meantime, and what you do with these, if you were baking a whole pan of them, that one got a little pan. There we go. When you're baking a whole pan of them, you would just wrap them in tin foil and stick them in the oven and hold them at about 200 degrees as you're preparing for the other. Now, as we're waiting on this, my orange sauce to reduce a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit of brown mustard. Now, this particular mustard is from Chef Awita, who is a James Beard nominee. She's one of the few women to ever get a James Beard nominee, and she's from Kentucky. She lives in Midway, and I think that's kind of cool. And I'm all about doing Kentucky products and being Kentucky proud. So we're waiting for this to get down, and the idea is that when this syrup gets to its consistency, it will be almost thick enough to coat the spoon, and it'll slide off different. And I hope I can show you what it is. So we're going to add the chicken back in. And whenever you're using chicken, you always use a second plate so that you're not contaminating, because chicken very much can contribute to salmonella. So I'm setting my plate aside. And I'm going to let this chicken just stew off just a few more minutes, probably about 3 more minutes. I'm going to add a little bit of green onions to this chard on the back. Turn that back on and just kind of put it on really low heat, really low, just so it stays warm. Add the green onions, and as this begins to thicken up, you would probably put, normally you would put 2 or 3 pieces, but for demonstrations today I'm just putting the one, and I'm kind of pouring it over it a little bit to help it glaze off and get a very pretty color to it. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll plate. Now this particular menu was inspired by a place in Louisville called Hillbilly Tea. Now if y'all know me, I take it kind of as an offense when anybody claims to be a hillbilly and they live in Louisville. And this particular chef is from Yugoslavia, so you can imagine how skeptical I might have been. The man can cook, and he did not make fun of us being a hillbilly. So how he plated these was he took one of the very pretty corn cakes. Let's see if I can get a hold of this one. And he set that toward the back. So he kind of makes a big presentation, and this will impress your family. And then he takes the, he took the chard, and he plated it. I tell you what, it's not wanting to come out of there, but there's more than one way to skin the cat. And he puts the chard right like this. So it's all pretty. Then he added just a few. He didn't use almonds. Actually, he used walnuts, but I like almonds a little better. I think they're pretty. They've got that little bit of teriyaki sauce. So you got a little bit of an Asian flair. But again, we're using ingredients that you well know. And then we take the chicken. And plate that on the top. We come here. Set this aside just a little bit, and I'm going to add just a little bit of green onions across the top to give it just a little bit more something. What do they say in French? Je ne sais quoi? I don't know. Down here we say just to add something. And there you have it. A beautiful plate of orange ginger chicken with Swiss chard and a honey corn cake. Your family will be so excited. It's pretty, isn't it? And so let's take a bite and see how it goes. Just a little bite of chicken. And when I eat, I like to get a little bite of everything. So it's going to be a big bite. A little bite of this, and then this honey cake. Anytime you're cooking with honey, it can't be bad. A little bit of that sweetness. Here we go, big bite. Oh, makes you think that summer can't be far away. I'm Joyce. You're watching Friends Drift In, and I hope you'll share the giggles.